And so what's that hypothetical situation? How's this structure going to work?
Oh, so how would you structure an off-season growing phase nutritionally for like maybe someone who's has trouble putting on weight, maybe someone who is quite husky in the first place, so to speak. What's the approach nutritionally?
Okay. Well,
So I
I'll,
reckon I reckon
yeah.
that'd be a good question.
Okay, so I'll answer and we'll let you do it. Okay, so what I would do in this approach from learning from mistakes, but by saying this, I went the other way deliberately and I got a lot of size by doing it. I deliberately stayed out of shape, but just punched my body weight up. And I just deliberately ate heaps and just ate as much as I could, right? This is what I did, if I'm being honest, at the beginning when I started. Um, like I just ate and ate and ate and ate and ate and put all my size on because that first year is my best year, my best growing year. That first year, you're going to get the most amount of size that you're going to get the newbie gains. By saying this though, if I had my time over again, by knowing what I know now and everything I think, I would have leaned out first and then did it. So then it wouldn't have been as hard to get it off.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have all the ghrelin issues and all the things. So from my mistake, you will learn and then you won't have the same problem that I had over these whole years. So this is a factor. By saying that though, if you were better to start and you could go straight in that first year, you would have much better result, being that first year being able to eat more calories. But like I said, just for past mistakes and making
Yeah.
it easier on yourself with cravings and the other thing, I think it would be better to go that way. What about you? What do you think?
I think look, if I'm looking at somebody who's like genetically when they're growing up, they've never been fat, so they've always been quite slim and thin. The
Oh, that's it.
approach for me
Yeah, that's a
when I
different.
get somebody with,
Sorry,
oh,
that's a
you'll be,
different. Let's
you'll
do
do
the
the
same
other,
one.
you'll do the
Let's
big
do
side.
do the same one.
Yeah,
So we
I
could
go big. All right. So
let's.
if somebody's quite husky,
Yep.
to start with, and generally you're going to know that because they're going to come to you fat. They are. They're going to be quite soft,
Yeah.
right? They're probably metabolically challenged somewhat, so they put on fat a lot easier, and that's probably due to the fact that they've been fat for a long time. That fat cells have multiplied.
Mm.
So what I'm going to do with them, I'm going to diet them down straight away, hands down.
Yeah.
They're going to have to get lean, and I don't care how long it takes. Like they're not going to have to get skinless. That's not going to happen. But the
15 or
aim will be
something.
to
Yeah.
get leaner, and obviously to create room to grow. So once they're lean, I'm going to obviously increase their food. Now, pardon?
You're right. It just cut out. That's right.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, once they're lean, once they're leaner in a spot where I think they can start growing, you have to look at what kind of food you're going to increase. So normally you have a baseline of protein, carbs, and fats, right? Generally, for somebody who's quite husky, they're going to be a little bit more insulin resistant. So you're not going to be able to feed them a whole lot of carbohydrates, all right? So what I would probably look at doing is putting their carbohydrates around their workout, structured mostly around their workout, and maybe leaving a few meals carb-free, right? Obviously driving their calories up. And look, for somebody who's quite big or who has been big, you have to be patient, right? You can't be putting on a kilo a week. It's not going to happen. It's not muscle, right? Even half a kilo a week's not muscle, in my opinion. So you might be looking at maybe 0.5% of body weight per week as a roundabout, So for a 100-kilo guy, that could be 500 grams, and that's pretty high. That's a lot, and that's not all going to be muscle. I'd probably even like it lower than that, to be honest. But then obviously when it comes to adding food, I would start around the workout perimeter. So have my baseline food there, try to keep that as high as you can. Once it gets to a certain level, you can start putting the food at other meals. So putting the carbohydrates at other meals. But I generally find for those people who are not insulin sensitive, because they've carried more body fat, look, and they can be more insulin sensitive than before because they're leaner, but they've still got that fat boy in them, you know what I mean? So keeping the carbs concentrated around the training to fuel training and recover, and having the other parts of the day as like lower insulin level days, a lower insulin level meal, sorry. So you can actually keep your blood glucose lower. You're not going to feel as bad, and you can actually tap into body fat a bit more,
With
Yeah.
with food, like I said, because I didn't really mention that, but that's okay. So I would do totally different than you there. if you're in with food, due to the ghrelin level for them having ghrelin in cravings and coming from training a lot of overweight clients and keeping them sticking to their nutrition, because the mental thing for them sticking to it is a lot harder. I would spread it. I understand what you're saying, but the insulin sensitivity, that definitely does have its place in that too. What I found is this for me in general, like, so like it's just a different grain, different way of doing something again. I
Yeah,
will
yeah,
spread their calories evenly for every meal. Maybe except for, their last
yeah.
evening meal. And I do this so insulin stays level. I want it to be level. I don't want it to be spiking constantly. I don't want it to, and realistically, I deliberately, if they're a bit overweight like that, I will deliberately break their calories up, not just straight bodybuilding style calories. I will deliberately pick 1 or 2 meals later in the evening. So I'll give them an option of what they got something to look forward to. Because the trick is to get them enticed and into the plan and sticking to the plan. So to do this, what I do is I give them two
Mhm.
things that they look forward to. On top of that, I've got a couple of other strategies I usually intergroove in that help where they get more food. So they end up getting 4 options for their last meal. I do this and both of them keep them full. If they have a savory craving, I've got one for a savory craving. If they're having like a sweet craving, I've got one for that. But plus, I've got their 2 designated meals. And the reason that's, like I already explained the reason why it's done. And I found that helps them actually stick to it, and they actually stick to it in a longer period of time, especially because when they're overweight. But if they were coming to that, that's more going to stick to what they would stick to, definitely it would be more efficient to do it the way you did, like by timing it that way and giving them the carbs around training, because they're going to have a better response by training than other things. I just found that's what I found, because I come from not the same background as having to train athletes all the time, if you get what I mean. So it's just slightly a little bit
Yeah.
different, but I think that approach would still work as well, keeping the insulin levels level. You know what I mean? It would come more an issue if the insulin's not level. But anyway, my bad. Go back to you. Sorry. Where are we up to?
Mm. Mm. Yeah, no, and both the approaches work. I just find that if somebody's come to lose weight and they're actually motivated to lose weight, right?
Yep.
Not just, I want to lose weight. Oh, I don't want to do this. No, no, no. I don't work with those people. That's just not me.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
that's a horrible thing to say. It's not a horrible thing to say. I just don't work. I'm not your mother.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be like, come on, try your best. I'm not that guy,
Yeah.
right? But if you
I
come
get
to me
that.
and you say, listen, you really want to make a change, I'm gonna say there's an approach where we can go quicker, but it's going to be a bit harder,
Mm,
right? But I will say to them, do you want results? Do you want them quicker? And
mm,
generally, what I find is, because I do have a lot of Gen Pop clients, and
mm.
I've coached people on my Instagram from like 120 odd kilos down to 86.
Yeah.
You know, and what we end up doing is we end up finding what their crutch is, right? So whether it's overeating, whether it's snacking,
Mm,
and I say, listen, when you start to get results, your mindset should change, because you're going to see what you're doing and
mm,
how you're doing that kind of nutritional approach, and it's working for you. So if you can get sometimes some good momentum going off the front end
mm.
and keep the momentum going, you can keep the client progressive, even though it's harder.
Mm.
But they have to have a buy-in.
Yeah.
They have to have the buy-in. If you've got somebody that's done 50,000 diets and failed at all of them, you can't start like that. They're
No,
not going to. They're not. It's not going to
I
happen for them.
like I
You know?
said, when I do that, I don't sugarcoat it. They get 80% of what I'm telling them to eat the other meals, and it's clean food and carbohydrates. I know it's going to take ages to break down, so it's only that one. So it's like that 20 to 15%, just that one thing. I just found it just helps them, like, you know what I mean? But like I said, there's lots of clients where I don't get the results with them, and you'll know, because you're like, you're doing it and you're like, like 6 or 7 weeks in, or even 3 weeks in, and they've like hardly lost anything. You're taking food away each week. If you're not taking food, because another thing, you've either increased food or changed thing, but their measurements and their calipers go up during this period of time. So obviously they're not sticking to what their thing is. Where their measurements their measurements would go down, but their weight could go up due to muscle and training dependent, if they haven't trained over like a period of time, over like a 3-month period, due to muscle memory. It took a long time to get that out, because some people trained in the past, and you always get that point where you gain a whole heap, so it's sort of dependent more so there.
Yeah.
It's so more than one way of doing things sometimes, though. It's so it's just it's
And
strange, if you get what I mean.
everyone's got their own
Yeah,
approach.
yeah,
Yeah, everyone's got their own approach, and sometimes it comes down to, you've got to actually connect with the person that you're working with as well.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? So look, I think generally people that come to me as a coach, they know my approach a little bit, right?
Mm.
So they know they're not coming to me to be like, I'm not going to hold both your hands and say, come on. I will give you all the tools necessary to complete it, but we've got to establish some good habits, some sustainable habits, and actually treat the cause of the issues, you know? So that way, like a lot of bigger people, once they get bought in and they see results, they are likely to stick to it. But
Yeah,
they
100%.
are also have the tendency to fall off very quickly too. So you just got to watch and mentally look after them too. Can be a tricky thing. So setting like short-term goals for people is a good thing. Like, you know, we're saying that when it's in an off-season phase, trying to grow someone, you might have, you know, let's try and keep your waist under this measurement. Let's try and keep your A1C at this level. And that's for bodybuilders, though, not for general public. But then you're also looking, are we driving up measurements in the right areas?
Mm.
You know, so you're tracking all the metrics, making sure they're doing everything. And if they're doing everything, it should work, unless they're metabolically damaged. You know, in that case, you might have to strip them back and go, listen, carbohydrates are not for you at the moment. Your body's not using them. All
Yeah,
right,
I
let's
have
just go with the
found that
protein cut
same thing
approach.
too, sometimes too, with some clients. I don't like giving keto, but sometimes I do, just so they can
Mm,
stick to it, and they can stick to it. Well, like, because I don't like doing it. I prefer to give them carbohydrates and things like, but
mm,
I found that because of the ghrelin, you know, it's like one of the only things that stops them from doing the cravings, if you get what I mean. Like,
yeah,
it's sort of like, what about you? What do you ever had to give anyone a keto diet? I usually don't like doing it, but I have
yeah.
done it.
No, I've
Yeah.
done heaps. I've done.
Yeah.
Look, put it this way: if take people's their mental side and like everything out of it, and just they were disciplined people. Ideally, I'd start most big people on keto
Oh, really?
because because it's going to deplete the glycogen stores quickly, right? They're going to get the rapid fat loss, so their motivation is going to be high. They have a lot of energy on their body already,
Mm.
right? So that
Yeah.
energy will eventually, they'll click into ketosis, and it's not, I'm not doing a normal keto. It's not like
Yeah,
the
it's
70%.
bodybuilding keto. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
just
I guess.
replacing your
Yeah.
carbs with fats, right?
That,
But like
yeah.
that way they're going to get motivated. They're going to see the drop after maybe 4 weeks. At that, I might say, okay, we're going to add in now some carbohydrates.
Oh, you can
By
see
that
how they
stage,
respond more efficiently then, because they're insulin
yeah,
sensitive. So that's how you get that to work in between without just them coming to fresh. Then you don't got to feed them all them carbs. So that's I
yeah.
get your
And
logic now.
so
Yeah,
you
yeah,
slowly start to drip feed it in
yeah,
where their body can accept it, and it
yeah.
might just start at maybe having them post workout or pre workout, you
Mm,
know, and then you can build it up around the workout window. Then as the food gets high, maybe you can stagger some lower carb meals. We'll still have a little bit of carbs in there
mm.
outside of the workout window, and that way you've built up the metabolic flexibility, and you've also now taught them that hey, your body does work. You've just had to treat it right.
And
Do you know what I mean?
especially with them first coming to you too, because they might not be used to eating as much protein. So by doing that, it first gets
They're
them
gonna be
used to
full as
eating
hell.
the protein, and then the other. Because like I've had many times in the past when I do the higher proteins, like I eat the 400 or the 300. I'm not doing that now, but like in the past, I've done that a lot. And you know, so just to get that down, sometimes I've converted to keto to start there and then increase the carbs. So I'm used to it,
Yeah.
expand the stomach, if you get what I mean. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and
yeah,
like I
yeah.
said, the approach for somebody who's quite husky, quite big, you have to be a bit slower. Everything is slower. The increases are slower. Hopefully, the weight gain's slower, but
Mm,
it can also rush up too. So you've got to be careful of things. And vice versa, we look at like maybe the ectomorph side, all right? If we go into that route, that person there's going to be the opposite, really. So somebody who's an ectomorph, you might not have to give them as much protein as
mm.
somebody who's an endomorph or like a big husky person because they don't need the satiation of food,
Yeah.
right? They need food to be going through them quickly. Now, my approach is something like who's quite small and has a good, let's say they're smaller, but they have a good metabolic rate, right? They can process food well. It would be literally have their food spread out across the day and slowly build up their carbohydrates. I'm not for normally adding a lot of extra fats in unless they are super hard gainers.
Mm.
Right? And even in that respect, like I just don't see a need to push fats up really high. And I'm talking like for me, for most of my I don't think I have many clients who would be over 70 or 80 grams of fat.
Yeah.
hardly any. Like most of them are way under.
You
Like
just need
half of
it for the central
yeah,
hormones, and that's so
the
it's
essential
yeah,
essential fatty acids, and then everything in your meats. But
yeah.
like the person that's slimmer, they can probably tolerate more carbohydrates. So they're probably going to get maybe intra-workout carbohydrates, simple sugars,
It
right?
does
They're
slow the
probably
digest. Sorry to interrupt you. It does slow the digestion down a great deal, though, when you add lots of like fats like that. So if you're having the association problem with like always being hungry, that can help that sometimes if you like, you know what I mean? It's what
yeah.
I found
I, I,
anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. But another way to combat that, I'll just say add more some vegetables, because,
Oh yeah.
like I said, when we look at macronutrients, this is how I look at macronutrients: protein recovery and building, carbohydrates for activity, fats for hormones. I don't look at fats as like you're going to be running on them for performance or anything like that. We just want to keep fats for your hormone production, use the carbohydrates for energy, protein to spare muscle and build muscle. Now, in the like the ectomorph, you can probably push their carbohydrates up quite high and go a lot quicker in the upward phase. All right. You can push it up. Now, some people require a lot of simple carbohydrates because, like, I've had some clients who have been, no joke, low 70 kilos, eating like 6,000 calories a day. That's a lot for a tiny person,
Mm.
yeah. And they just physically, I just can't eat any more whole food. So then you might have to put things in. And for me, I like to put in things like they might be simple sugars, but they still have some kind of health benefits. Things like cranberry juice, pomegranate juice, them type of juices. They're very easy to get down. They're like
Hmm.
pomegranate. I think per cup is like 38 carbs, and it actually has good health benefits too. Do you know what I mean? So that way you can add food in, which is still simple sugars, but still have some health benefits instead of just doing sugary shakes and stuff. I'm not into
I
that. So
would, I would, I would do that if he was a hard gainer like that. That's what I'd do to him. I'd jam him a whole heap of sugar. I'd be before training, during training, after training, and then I'd dump all the sugar out. That's the,
yeah,
yeah,
I'll give them some free.
that's what I'd be doing.
I'll give them sugars like intra, but I'm not huge on giving a lot outside the window of intra workout, because I just find that when you push sugars out a lot, high GI sugars a lot, you're eventually you get sick of eating it. You get sick of
Yeah,
the sweetness, then you get sick of food, and then you're done. So you've got to go backwards again and go forwards.
yeah,
So I look, some people have to go all over the place. Nobody's different, but when you look at somebody who's quite thin, they need food. So
yeah,
you've got to find a way to get food to them. Some of them say my appetite's shot. All right, let's switch to this carbohydrate. See how this works for you.
yeah,
Something a bit more dense. And the opposite of the big person, they're going to have to go something a bit more voluminous,
yeah,
to keep their appetite at bay. So you really want to you want the skinnier person to be stimulated, but
yeah.
assassinating their food very quickly. And the bigger person, you want it to be a bit slower.
I'd only do that on their training day for the skinnier person, though.
Oh
So
yeah,
so it's
rest
not,
days you don't need.
I'm not jamming all that pointless sugar. I'm making it. I'm going to make sure they utilize that sugar, if you understand what I
Yeah,
mean, without saying.
yeah, yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
so yeah, but yeah, I just found that usually creates a lot more growth there as well, especially for them. But you're more important to have them other meals, and they still got to be able to eat them. But I did find by doing that lots of times and having too much sugar, as you said, I had bad side effects there. You'll get like sort of like a weird sickness. You'll feel like
It's like a flu. It's like a flu. It's like a
sort of.
slug.
It's because what I found is it's because it doesn't digest enough quicker while you're training, because the digestion doesn't work the same while you're training, if you get what I mean. And you've
And,
consumed
and,
too much during that training window, and it's like it messes with
and
it. Yeah.
really, it's just your blood sugars are so high. Your
Mm.
blood sugars, when you're at that level of
You feel
food, your blood sugars
tired
are
too.
so
Yeah.
high all day. You're just like this. Want to fall asleep. So that's why managing blood sugar, even in
Mm.
somebody that is like quite small and has a good metabolic rate, is hugely important, because when your food gets really high, you get very sleepy. And that
Yeah.
when you get to that point, generally your thirst goes as well. You're not very thirsty as well,
Yeah.
and it's a bad ending. It's a really bad ending because you get sort of you don't drink enough water, you're not hungry, but you'll
You get
force the food
headaches
down, and
then
you won't
too. Yeah.
yeah, and you won't move that much either because you're like, oh, I'm too tired.
Mm.
So it's like you're running yourself into a dead end. and then you've got to go back and push forward. So you just got to monitor it to make sure, because it can be a tricky thing for most people. What some people do, what I do with some of my clients, is if they're on bang on it, we can do like maybe a 6-week push up with food and a 1-week pullback. And what that does is it keeps your appetite up, right? And when I say a pullback, I mean, I've got like one of my clients, Greg, he's on my Instagram, very good physique. He's like, we just finished a growth phase, but we would do like 5 weeks of really pushing food, right? 1 week of pulling it back. Because we found that when we get to a certain level of food, the appetite's gone. Once the appetite's gone, digestion's gone. You're not actually digesting your food. You're not using your food.
Yeah, he
Doesn't matter
just
how
gets
much you're putting in.
sluggish and he just doesn't want to eat. Yeah,
Mhm.
so
So
he'd have
literally,
to just push that line constantly. He just would. Yeah.
yeah, and that's what you've got to do. It's constantly trying to go further. But we would go from like 4,500 calories, about 4,000 on
Does
calories,
that
you know,
does that
and then I'll
usually? Sorry.
drop it.
Does that
And
usually
then
kick? I'll wait.
then I'll drop it in that week. Literally, I probably might drop it like 1,100 calories per day. But by the end of that week, he's very hungry and he's ready to grow again. You know, so it's like you go forward, pull it back for a week or 5 days or something, and then push it up again. And that way, it's like you're going like this, down, and then you just. And look, it doesn't last forever, but you get a lot more runway in your off season that way.
But before you have to do that, did you find that they've got a certain amount of time before that falls off? That's what I was going to ask. So is it like a 8-week period, or it just straight away for him? Because I found, some people it's usually like 8 weeks, 10 weeks. Some can push to 15 or 20, and then it just dies. You know what I mean? I found 15 or 20, and then I die. But I just no more for me. If you get what I mean. So yeah,
I've found in most people that you can. These days, because I'm a bit more skilled in it, I'll try and catch it before they get to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you catch it when you're there, you're going to have to spend more time in that harsh deficit to get it back. Okay. If you get it before you get there, so on my check-ins, it'll be like hunger. If your hunger's 0, you've gone too far. Like you really have to pull back.
So you want them to have that hunger that whole time then?
Yeah. I want somebody to be hungry, slightly hungry, all year. That would be the best possible scenario.
Because when you're hungry, it sucks.
Yeah, everyone does. Everyone does, but everyone grows better when they're slightly hungry.
Yeah.
Because your food goes through you better.
Steaming,
it's
craving for it.
You know? Yeah. And that's why people who generally stay leaner will generally build more muscle tissue. Generally. Because insulin sensitivity, they're not feeling like a slug, so they're not like just not moving anymore. It's just a way better whole body experience, a body feeling for them.
Don't have to spend as long in the deficit either, so they can stay more in the surplus. So yeah, it's going to be a plus.
But like I said, there are so many ways to skin a cat. But I've had some people have to go like we just change. Like I said, I don't normally do it. Where we change the meat sources to a bit fattier cuts, but I have done that too.
I've never done that yet. I've done it the other way, where I take them away and I make them clean. I haven't done it that way yet. Never done that. Never found that one yet.
Yeah, I've got a few people who are real hard gainers, and like you can put their carbs up to so much. There's only so much you can give someone. You know what I mean? There's a cap. So what do? Instead of making the volume of the food more, you're trying to make it more condensed, so more dense.
So there's you might go from more minces and you wouldn't do a silver side or a lamb or something because they're high as well. They're not as good at digesting though. Yeah.
Unless you're going to be adding some very easy to digest fat like macadamia nut oil or avocado oil. That's very easy, but generally, so you go from chicken breast, I might say, all right, now we're going to switch to chicken thigh. All right. If we're going for barramundi, we might say do half barramundi, half salmon. You know, and then with the meats, you might go from extra lean 5-star mince to maybe just the lean mince. So your volume of food is the same, or sometimes even smaller, but your calories are higher. You know, but this only works for a limited time too, because eventually calories gets you.
You get used to it.
You know, and then all you do then, but when you're at that stage, what you do is you just revert back to the clean meats. That's a clean up in itself. You're taking away calories there, and then if you pull the carbohydrates,
and then it's going to create a change in their body straight away as well. You're going to see that
Boom.
transition across.
So you do that for a little bit, then go back in, add the carbohydrates again when they get to that point. Maybe switch over to the other meats. Once they hit a stumbling block, once they've maxed out, you reset again.
Have
So
you
that's like
ever
my approach.
have you ever found that that's a good, a very good approach? There's like 20 or 30 different approaches in the time. Yeah, have you ever found that you will end up getting someone? I went back to my other conversation, half having it in my head there. We'll cut that bit out. So, so it's the first mistake I made. Look out, look out. So when you are, have you ever found that you've had to change someone's nutrition constantly, like every week, because they're just their metabolism just so just ends up stalling? Have you ever had to do that for anyone?
Stalling?
Well, not so much store. They just will just stay the same body weight because I had this happen to me because I had to. This is another reason I had to learn my own nutrition. So, as an
if,
example, like
Mhm.
if when I get to a certain stage, my body doesn't do it all the time, but it will, and it will just basically. If I don't change something every single week, I would just stay the same way. I just don't change. It could be as simple as I'm just recomping. I don't know. It's weird, and my calories are so low when I do this. It's really
I've,
weird.
I've found ways to get around things like that. You can do like a modified protein fast for a day, which will
Okay.
really get you digging into fat, but it also does drive fatigue too, which you have to balance. But generally, if the only time I've really had to make change like week to week or even midweek is when somebody's coming out of a contest or maybe leading into a contest where your metabolism either ramps up because you've taken some of the stress out, like you've pulled cardio out, you're already lean, you can actually drive food back up and still keep your show condition.
Hmm.
Or then post show when you're increasing food and the metabolic rate just picks up quickly and they
Oh,
start losing weight, so you have
yeah,
to
you
feed
feed them
them.
more.
I'm a bit like that,
Yeah.
right? So for myself at my end of my comp prep, the week after I didn't weigh any. Look, I weigh everything all year, but I said I know how much. I weighed my meat and I said I'm just going to eat the carbohydrates as I want them. And I wasn't full, I wasn't hungry. I know it's crazy after a show. I wasn't really that hungry, but I actually probably underate. Yeah, so my weight came down. I got down to my peak week, start of peak week weight, 4 days after my show again. And I was like, okay, I need to eat a bit more.
You need
You know
some
what I
more
mean?
food. Yeah.
So I had to increase my food.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's one person. Most people probably don't get to a level where they're at such a high level of food at their end of their prep. Most people are digging quite towards the end. Hopefully they got a time to freshen up, but like the ideal prep would be you diet down and then you reverse engineer into the show so you freshen up.
Yeah.
That's how I try and approach most of my clients. But their metabolism can ramp quickly. You know, it can just start running away with you,
Yeah.
run away with it. So you've got to be careful, and then you've got to start adding food in. But then you've also got to think about how much can they handle because their stomach's probably quite small as well after a
That's
show.
that's when
You
when
know,
when you start to get heaps leaner. That's when you can usually get away with another medium day or another high day, depending if you're doing it that way. That's when that helps, if you get what I mean. When that manipulation's sort of there, because
I
you can make more changes quicker if you got to make a lot of them.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. And generally, like I sometimes will not even put a high day in for someone. Like I got some people in prep, they haven't had a high day until like about 8 weeks out.
Yeah, you just diet them all the way
And
through. Yeah.
yeah, but the thing is, if you're not fatigued and you're still getting good pumps, your training performance is there, and you're losing body fat at a good rate, you don't really need a high day. The high day comes when you depleted and you need to refuel to a performance, or in a Gen Pop client when mentally they just eat an out, you know. And my Gen Pop clients get a cheat meal at most every week anyway.
Yeah.
But some people do require that mental, like, okay, this day here, go and have a meal, enjoy yourself, don't do steps on that day, relax and just reboot, you know?
I'm probably more relaxed on them than you are. So, as an example, I experiment with them. Well, not really experiment. I've already done this experiment on me and my past clients. So, but with each person, I mean, it's a little bit different that meal setting. So, with one of them, I could turn around because I do that with my Gen Pop. They turn around. They have a 3 hour window. Some of them I give a 6 hour window where they eat for a period of time. Yeah,
It can be dangerous.
Yeah,
That could be
no,
dangerous.
I know that, I know this. That's why I experiment with the first. I start with a lesser amount, see how they respond. Then we just
Yeah.
adjust it accordingly. Because sometimes, especially with your Gen Pops, like they might want to drink or something. It becomes harder then because when they drink that whole day, basically whatever they're eating is getting stored. So, like, you know, even if they pull a deficit, but it's because it's got to get rid of that chemical first, the
Mm.
alcohol. You understand what I'm
Alcohol.
talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you've got to be careful that way because some of them, that's just what they do, and if they let you know in enough time, because technically with them, then it's more about the calories over the whole week, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
So,
True.
if we
True.
make it sort of a few adjustments on the way, we can plan for things like that if they're happening. So it's just a little bit
I
more
would.
suffering for the week for them, though. Yeah,
That's what sometimes you got to do that. You got to say, listen,
yeah,
if a client says, listen, I've got a wedding coming up,
mm,
and I say, listen, you're going to have fun at the wedding, enjoy yourself
mm,
within reason. Don't get
mm.
smashed and obliviate
Maybe
50
a
plates of
six
cake.
pack. That's about it.
But like you might say, all right, for the 3 days preceding that, before that, sorry, we might have to lower your calories a bit to
Mm,
offset the damage.
mm.
So it's about working with the client and understanding if they can actually implement what you want them to do. If
Yeah,
somebody is very, very they struggle with change, sometimes you just got to say, listen, this week we're not going to change it. Have your meal. We'll deal with it the week coming up.
yeah,
Because all that mucking about of saying, okay, we're going to modify they're all stressed out. It stresses them out.
yeah,
So sometimes you just got to look at each person as an individual
yeah,
person and say, this will probably be the best suited line of action for you.
yeah.
Might not be for the next person, but for you, I think this will work for
Yeah,
you. You know?
as simply as like as an example, instead of if they're doing a 3 hour, you just give them one meal for the next 2 weeks, and that makes up a 1 week. Dig a little bit deeper there or something. You can slightly adjust without them thinking about it. Then you know what I mean. If that's the
Exactly.
case, so you can do other
Yeah.
things, or you can just simply as increase their cardio a little bit because that's another tool I like to use. So I keep
Mm.
cardio back as a tool. I don't use cardio as you explained the same way. So each time I want to make a change, I will add another 15 minutes of cardio, another 15
Yeah.
minutes of cardio, another 15 minutes of cardio. I don't know how you
Mm.
structure that. How do you structure your cardio when you're doing your jumps and your increase?
In the increase, like when geez,
Right.
in the increase, cardio, I would sometimes I change the modality. So like they've got say they're doing steady state, I might
Mm.
say let's do some sprints 2 or 3 times a week,
Oh,
nowhere near
nice.
the leg workout,
Yeah.
right? Because that will stimulate metabolic rate a bit better. It's shorter duration,
Burn
but it's
longer.
also more fatiguing. So if you were to do that maybe on a look, for some people, I'll use an example. Say they got good arms, right? And they've got a day where they're doing some arms and something, a small workout. I'll say after that, do the sprints, right? Because that way you're not really, your arms are a strong point. You're not really taking away from that. It's a small workout.
Yeah.
Let's really up-regulate metabolic rate using the intensity sprints, high intensity sprints there,
Mm.
but generally for most in the off season, I keep cardio as, I'm not really getting anyone to do any more than most people 20, 30 minutes. I try like 5 days a week. That's what I'm telling them to do. I'll do it every day. But for every day, some people are like, I can see it can be a bit of an issue for them,
Yeah. Is that
So
the
I say
same?
5 days.
Is that the same when they're in competition?
No, competition, different story. They can,
So,
I
yeah.
might get them to do the Tour de France, mate. They could be doing Tour de France.
Who the
No,
fuck?
but
Oh no.
they could be riding. No, but put it this way:
Yeah.
if in a contest prep, if you're getting on stage in hardly nothing, you do what you need to do.
Yeah.
So
Has to
if
be
you've got
done.
to do if you've got to do real low carb and you've got to do a lot of output, that's not ideal. But if you've got to do it,
That's what you got to
you're the
do.
one who's got to get up
Yeah.
stage, mate. And I will tell people, listen, I don't want to do this, but it's what's required. And look, can you throw other things at them like fat burners, your T3, clan, and if they're assisted? Yeah, you can. But ideally, you're just going to use food and output,
Yeah,
But
100%.
some people require more output than others.
I
Some
look at
people
it
do.
as only 200 calories. So I'm like, okay, so I just pull 200 calories.
Mm.
Same
See, and
issue.
in my head, maybe because I diet on a bit more food than maybe other people, but in my head, 200 calories, I'm like, just take the food away. It's easier.
Yeah, 200
Keep
calories.
the
That's what I
cardio,
said. Yeah.
keep the cardio the same. Keep the food there. But if you're already on very minimal calories, You
Yeah, you
can't
do the
really take too
cardio.
much more.
Yeah, especially if you were
Yeah,
down at that lower point at year like 2.5. You were saying before, weren't you? 2.5, 2.8,
yeah,
2.5. Yeah,
yeah, 2.5, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So at that stage, you're sort of like, yeah, I probably don't want to start touching them. If you're in like the freeze and the floors, I'm like, I just put 200 calories.
Exactly. But I will say this, like when it does come to like getting lean, there are going to be moments where you have to really hurt. You know, you actually have to hurt, and it's whether it's taking food away or doing extra cardio.
Mm,
You're going to find what one you can manage the best,
That's
and what one doesn't impede your performance as much. You know, and some people, females, you can absolutely punish them with cardio, and they're like, "I'm fine." Some big males I got, you give them 30 minutes, mate, I'm dying. I almost fainted. I settle down, mate, settle down.
didn't
You know,
fail, just
but
didn't want to do it.
yeah, like big bodybuilders who are like,
Yeah,
you put them on a treadmill at like level speed 4, their heart rate's like 140 when they first start doing it. You know,
yeah,
you're like, whoa. So they don't really do much cardio.
yeah.
Some people, so it's a bit different for others. But females normally, I will say that females are more resilient than males. So
Mm.
I'll tell a female literally to eat sand should be how much? How much sand? Yeah. You tell a guy to eat something, tell a guy to eat a chicken breast sometimes, like, mate, oh, come on, you're going to have steak. Like, come on, brother.
Yeah,
You want to get in shape or not?
yeah.
You know?
Did you find with there's a much other difference with that? Did you find that they usually respond better without the carbohydrates, more females? Do they usually get a lot less carbs because of the calorie
Yeah.
restriction is obviously a lot less due just to the output is like half nearly, you know what I mean, straight
Well,
away. So yeah.
if you've got a 50-kilo bikini chick, they don't require much food. And
Mm,
for them to do cardio, like say they do an hour of cardio, they're only 50 kilos. So they're not burning that many calories. There's not much of them.
mm,
Do you know what I mean? But like I said, sometimes you just have to do it. And with the females, generally, I do find that most females cannot have really high carbohydrate approaches.
yeah.
Some can, some are blessed. But
Yeah.
just like there's,
It's rare. Yeah.
there's a bell curve. There's a bell curve, isn't there?
Yeah.
But generally, I've found females work better with a lower, not low carb, but lower carb, moderate fat approach to keep their hormones balanced.
Yeah.
I've even had females do like not even carb up for shows.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Really?
they just look better. Yeah,
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
wife's a prime example.
Yeah.
She won heaps of shows, but she's won like Miss Victoria probably a lot of times. And some of the shows, I would look at her, I think, you know what? This is how you look at a week out. You look ready.
Mm,
So if we had carbohydrates that traditionally try and load them up a little bit, they get a little bit softer, some people. And I think to myself, do you know what? Let's not even load carbohydrates. Let's just keep them steady and bump your fats up towards the end of the week to give you some stored energy for the next day of competing, right? And you're not going to put on water. And even if you put on, let's say you put on half a kilo of fat, you would not even, no, that's a bit extreme. 100
yeah.
grams of fat on that day before.
It'd be
You're
about to
not
be
going to
about
see that.
200 or 100 each day. Yeah.
And you are not going to spill any water. So it becomes a bit more of a very predictable peak.
Mm,
But you have to know if the person is going to look better with that look as well. Some people can hold fullness with less carbohydrates, especially females. Some require they have to be filled out to look good,
mm.
you know. But I do find the higher fat approach, higher, not high, works very well for females, you know, especially like with hormonal balance, which is very important for females, especially post show as well.
Mm.
Hugely important. Females, like you might have to take fats out of everyone, you know, but after a show, you've got to get them fats back in to get their hormones, get them regenerate, get them recovering,
That's
in a good
that's
spot.
that's why it would slightly panic me trying to get a female ready for a show because once they get under that 15% mark, their menstrual cycle can go, you know, and I sort of,
It will go. It will go. It will
it
go.
will go, you know, and I don't want to be the cause of that. So I've sort of like, I don't
Mm.
know if I'm ever going to coach one of them to do that. I don't think I
Yeah.
will, if you get what I mean,
Yeah.
for being
And
honest. Yeah.
the thing is, I mean, like it's different because a female will come to me, wants to compete, and I'll tell them, this is probably going to happen. You know this,
Mm,
correct? That you cannot, like, bodybuilding's healthy to a degree. Getting on stage lean is not healthy.
yeah.
That's not. And you've got to make that a point to say, listen, after the show, you're going to have to really, really be on it. You know what I mean?
We're about to cut out. It was awesome. Thank you very much. We're very in depth,
All good.
very knowledgeable. It was awesome. Thank you very much.
No,
Appreciate you.